Okay, great. Looks like we've got critical mass. I'm Harry Leach with Apprenticeships for America. Welcome. Thanks for joining for today's webinar. Firstly, I'm going to get things kicked off. Firstly, just a little bit of housekeeping. Um, we're recording this session. We'll share the slides and the link to the recording around afterwards. So, no need to take notes. And then format-wise, we're going to have a short presentation up front. Then we've got a great panel discussion lined up, and then we'll have some time for Q&A towards the end. So if you've got any questions or thoughts as we're going through, please put anything in the chat as we go along, and we'll try and come back to it. Or you can save your question to the end, put your hand up, whatever works best for you. Awesome. So today we're spending some time on the relationship between education, higher education and apprenticeship, and specifically how research can help bridge the gap between the two. So we're really pleased to have our friends here today from Education Northwest. I'll let Rachel introduce herself in a bit. Rachel's going to talk through some great work that Education Northwest did in the space in Washington State, and then we've got a brilliant panel from the state who are going to talk about their experiences. Before we get into it, I just want to say a little bit up front about why Apprenticeships America cares about this, why that higher education apprenticeship connection matters to AFA, why we think this is an important topic that's worth spending some time on. The first point is it's really not straightforward to define kind of where apprenticeship sits. If you look at the policy world, sometimes it's labor, sometimes it's a workforce program, sometimes it's in education. In the UK, in my last role in government, we actually moved apprenticeship formally between the three departments. It started in education, then it went to commerce, then it went to labor. We see that a bit in the States as well. States put responsibility for apprenticeship in different places. So, it's slightly undefined. We're sitting between an education program or workforce program. What that does a little bit, we have a bit of a kind of language and practice barrier. While it's solvable, and there's some great work in states in particular that have been able to kind of crack the code. There's a lot of people spending their time how to figure out how to kind of translate the structures of apprenticeship, on the job learning, clock hours, into the language of higher education, credit and credentials. It's solvable, but it's not a kind of easy and automatic translation. So there's a lot of states and practitioners grappling with these issues, which is why we think it's important to spend time on. Final point I want to make up front: we're at AFA all about scale, growing apprenticeships. Internationally, apprenticeship degrees are one of the fastest growing areas in the world of apprenticeship. So in Germany at the moment, about 5% of all degrees are an apprenticeship. Similarly, in the UK, about 20% of all apprenticeships are at the degree level. They're in higher education institutions. So it's a really important space for scale. If you transpose those numbers into the US context, that we've got a kind of ready-made infrastructure built for scale. So if you said just 3% of bachelor degree enrollments in the US were through an apprenticeship, that would mean an additional 300,000 apprentices a year. We'd instantly hit the president's 1 million goal for apprenticeship. But anyway, to get there, we've got lots of work to do to figure out how to solve that kind of language and practice barrier. So with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Rachel, to talk about your work in Washington.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Harry. And hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's so great to see where everybody is coming from. So many great places. I am a researcher at Education Northwest, based in Portland, Oregon, but I'm originally from Iowa, went to the University of Iowa. So if there's any Iowa folks in here, I see you. I've been at Education Northwest for about 4 years now. I do a lot of research in education and workforce, postsecondary, CTE, basic needs, apprenticeship, all of it basically using data and evidence to help inform policy and practice. And that's why this work is so important to me, because it is working at the intersection of so many things, of education, of workforce, of data, research. And so I got into this work working with Washington State They have a collaborative process to develop pathways to degrees for apprentices, and we supported them providing research for that process. And that is really what this presentation is centered around. And yeah, I'm someone who, before I got into this work, I really did not know much about apprenticeships. I did a lot of school-based work, so really in education. And what this project did was completely open my eyes to the world of apprenticeships. And so my perception switched from seeing education and workforce to really seeing as part of the whole ecosystem. And so I hope this presentation also helps with some of that shifting. Not seeing apprenticeship as something that was like in the past or out there, but seeing it as the present, as integral to our education and training systems today. So with that being said, here's our agenda for the day. We're kind of going to do like a learning arc. So I'm going to start with the high level why. So like what's the challenge and opportunity with connecting these systems? We'll focus in on Washington State, the approach that they're using to help with these connections. I'll then highlight cool key findings from our data and research and kind of what that meant. I'll then walk through the process that you can use in your own context to ground collaboration and research. And then last but certainly not least, we have an amazing panel of people from Wisconsin and Washington State to talk about how they use research and collaboration in their own work. And then we'll have a Q&A afterwards. So start thinking about your questions. We'll have a place for you to put those in the chat near the end. The goal is that you can walk away with usable insights that you can adapt in your own context. So I'll jump in. High level. Okay, we often traditionally treat apprenticeship and higher education as these kind of separate, distinct, or even competing pathways. And this is oversimplifying the relationship. There are obviously some connections between the two. But at a high level, as a person going through it, and you're looking like, okay, I know I have to get a job in this world. You're typically told, well, go to college. That's the pathway through it. Another less common but equally valuable pathway is apprenticeship. They're both designed to get the person to a career. They're both different education and training pathways. And just different delivery mechanisms. One can say that higher education emphasizes the classroom instruction learning, and apprenticeship emphasizes the on-the-job training. Each have components of the other as well, but the differences between the systems are really structural. So there's different funding mechanisms to both. They both sit in different departments. Well, now the Department of Ed and Department of Labor are combining a lot, but historically they've been really separate, different governance, different calendars. I mean, even time is conceptualized differently. The credit hours in higher education versus clock hours in apprenticeship. So even the time structure is different. The cultures are very different. They do. Again, I'm oversimplifying this disconnect to kind of make the point that historically, it's kind of been you choose a system, and because our culture has highly emphasized college, there's a lot of pressure on young people and adults to go to college. But there's another pathway as well of apprenticeship. So for learners, this disconnect is very real. It creates a friction and like an either or mentality. And it ends up being like you can go a few years into college or a few years into apprenticeship and be like, never mind, this isn't me. And now you kind of got to start over in either one. So there's not a lot of flexibility within both. You may have to just start on over another path. So the moving between systems is really hard. People can lose credit, can lose time. And so the reality is that learners this choice is a system choice. Learners often have to work and learn. You need money and you need education. And so learners really have a need for a clear pathway to a family sustaining wage that is both earning money and learning things. And so what happens then when the systems are disconnected? That's kind of the current challenge that we're facing.
Hey, Rachel,
what happens
we're not seeing slides.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for saying something. Can you see this?
Yeah. I'm seeing that, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you guys so much. I had this cute little image. It was such a visual you have to see. I am so sorry. Thank you, Sam, for saying that. I didn't notice. Okay, here's my little pathways. So you see, there's the higher education pathway, there's apprenticeship pathway, and often they're seen as distinct separate pathways to careers. Thank you for mentioning that, Sam. Sorry, here it is, you all. because then in the next one, you'll see we're connecting these pathways. And so what happens if there's more intentional connection between them? A clearer pathway then emerges. Learners maybe that don't have to choose between the two. They can do both, or more likely they can choose one and then change if that isn't the right fit. It's about moving seamlessly between education and workforce systems so that learning stacks over time and that leads to a meaningful credential. In a way, it kind of equalizes the playing field. So it's not like college has to be for everybody and that's the only way to a career. And it's not just apprenticeship is the only pathway either. It's really dependent on what best suits you, the learner. What is your learning style? What is your life circumstances? And that is then it's more individualized pathways. Like I said, and that kind of centers the learner in this and how their pathway is moving through the system. It's aligning education and workforce. We're hearing all about that these days. So you have rigorous classroom instruction and actual practical hands-on training that is needed. So it combines the earn and learn model in a way that kind of makes the best of both worlds. And again, this is oversimplifying the idea. We'll go into some of the challenges here, but this is kind of high level what it would look like. This isn't just theoretical. This is happening all over the country. You may see different states with their efforts to align systems. Why? Because learners are asking for it. Learners are asking for flexible, mobile pathways to help them get a job. And it has to be really flexible in meeting learners where they're at, who are often have families, have jobs, all the things. And so flexible pathways are becoming really important. The focus on credentials and mobility. And so there's a, rightly so a good attention on people having access to meaningful credentials because those credentials are really important to get a job. There's a lot of degrees have kind of been a focus. And while not all jobs need a degree and really good jobs don't, some jobs still do require a degree. But many others require an industry recognized credential like certificates and licenses. Again, there's not one credential that anyone needs, but just the opportunity to earn different credentials that apply in different settings and you can take to different careers. And then finally, the workforce demand. We've been hearing from employers all over the country that people need to come a little more ready with on-the-job skills, those kind of soft skills or technical skills that sometimes our education system isn't as set up to do. And so by combining some of the pieces of apprenticeship and higher ed, you really get that workforce alignment to meet the demand of the current jobs where you need to come out with some real world experience to be able to get some of the jobs of today. But this is complex, right? This is me focusing on here's the great advantages of this. But the reality is that these systems are separate kind of for a reason. They've grown separately. They have their own policies, cultures. And so it's not just like, oh, you combine them and it's a win-win. It's a really complex kind of integration that needs to respect everybody's roles involved in it. Because there's a high possibility of this getting into turf war situation. And then just practical challenges of funding, credentialing. But the promise is pretty huge. It's creating a system where both learners and institutions can kind of see benefits and thrive. So zooming into one state that is starting to do some work in this, Washington State is really leveraging statewide policy and collaboration to forge these connections. So there's the Senate bill that was passed in 2022, all about examining pathways to credentials for apprentices. Washington State has a very strong apprenticeship system, around 16,000 apprentices, and also a very strong community and technical college system with over 300,000 students. And there's been overlap. They've been doing a lot of work kind of connecting the two, but this bill is a really big kind of state level commitment and vision to sit down with partners across the ecosystem and discuss how are these pathways working? Is there a demand for degrees among apprentices for better connections? What are other states doing? How would we fund something like this? And so the William D. Ruckelshaus Center is a public policy facilitation center in Washington, and they were tasked with facilitating this process. So you had people from all the colleges, apprenticeship, employers, the different stakeholders for a multi-year collaborative process where they were going to then end with recommendations for the legislature on developing pathways. No easy task, right? That is why they turned to the idea of using research as a grounding for the process. Because there's going to be lots of people with different perspectives, different stories, and reaching like a shared reality can be pretty difficult. That's why if you bring credible evidence to the discussion, it can kind of provide this neutral anchor to help move conversations past the personal to the structural. It helps move people kind of past their own histories and stories, which are very true and really important, to thinking about the system level and the apprentice experience. And what does that pathway look like for the learner in the system? And so by bringing that kind of credibility and research and shared fact base, it helps conversations maybe be a little bit more productive and kind of give some shared language to base discussions off of. And of course, there's definitely room for the subjective experiences, the anecdotes. That's are important too. But having a shared, evidence, fact, having that can really ground the collaboration in something that can agree with for the most part. So what did we find? So Education Northwest, they then hired us to help them do this research, which was really fun. So the research we did was we looked at several different questions using different methods. The first big question we asked was, what are the current pathways to degrees for apprentices in Washington State? Well, we learned that most apprentices are receiving RSI in programs that have a partnership with the CTC. So 83% of apprentices, and they were receiving RSI in some sort of partnership with the CTC. Only 23% actually utilized the instructors and facilities, but there's still contractual partnerships with the community college to be able to provide college credit for the RSI. So there's already some sort of connection to colleges happening in Washington State, which is also the case in many other states as well. With this connection, apprentices are enrolled actually as students in the college and therefore have access to the support services and college credit. This is supported by when there's a 50% tuition waiver in Washington State for this. And also there's a Washington College grant for apprentices. And so that helps support the funding of it so the tuition and fees doesn't fall on the apprentice. A lot of that can be covered. And then finally, apprentices can apply this credit towards an associate degree, which is called the Multi-Occupational Trades Associate Degree, with the requirement of additional gen eds. And so this also say that there's a connection to college, but the pathway to a degree is not as clear. And there's many other examples of other states how they do this. This is I think mostly similar to other states' kind of models in a way, but some states, it's rare that some states build the gen eds and are into the apprenticeship program. So they finish the program with a degree and their certificate of completion. Some do the thing where you add on gen eds at the end. There's different models that states use to connect higher education and apprenticeship. This is just what Washington State is using. So then the question is, okay, this exists, but so how many people are enrolled? How many people are earning a degree? This was really fun because we worked with the state longitudinal data system with the ERDC to link apprenticeship and higher education data because that data is not linked. So we found that most apprentices are technically enrolled in a state community technical college, presumably for the RSI. This was over the past 20 years an average. And then on average, in terms of how many are earning a college certificate or degree, only 4% over the past 20 years are earning a college credential. So what this shows is, again, there's a lot of connections to the colleges, but the pathway to degree, the completion isn't yet happening. So then the question comes, why? Why are apprentices not interested in college credentials? Kind of what's going on? Because there are strong assumptions that apprentices just aren't interested in it. The jobs don't need it. So that's why we're like, we need to do a survey with apprentices to ask. And what we ended up finding is that there was a pretty high demand for college credit and credentials, actually. We did a survey. Please note there's many limitations to the survey. It is exploratory. We reached out to apprenticeship coordinators on an online database, asking them kind of cold calling to send this survey to apprentices. And we ended up talking to 725 apprentices, but out of all the apprentices, that is quite a small number. So this isn't representative, but even if that's the case, this is still really strong evidence that there is some interest there among apprentices. You'll see that 3/4 are interested in credit in an associate degree. The really interesting thing is this was much higher for apprentices of color than white apprentices. So there may be some equity that it may be the case that access to college credentials is an equity situation, that it could help increase access for people of color. There was no difference really in traditional industries and non-traditional industries, which again, you may expect that maybe the more non-traditional are more interested in a degree, but there was no meaningful difference between different occupations. The other thing, that there's already college credit in the system. Half of the people we surveyed say, I have college credits, and even 20% have a college degree. So people are coming in with this experience. 50% said I'm currently earning college credits in my program. Notably, 26% did not know. So there's a lot of confusion over if their RSI is counted for college credit or not. And then finally, 59% said they believe this would improve their career advancement. Again, notably, 20% do not think that's the case. So it's not that everybody thinks a degree is great. It's that different people find value in degrees. So this kind of reframed the issue to, is there a demand, to like, okay, then why isn't the system reflecting the interest that might be there? And yeah, so just keep in mind there's some people who did say, no, this will not help my career. I do not need this. And that's heavily in the construction, kind of building trades. But again, a lot of people in those trades as well that said this would be helpful. The focus groups really illuminated kind of the why behind this too. Apprentices were like, I can do that. We can get a degree. I would love that because that would increase my opportunities. I could then, it's just another a piece of paper that demonstrates I can do this. I did something and I'm competent. It's like another tool in the toolbox, somebody said. It's a pathway to maybe leadership positions if that's something you want to explore later on. And again, it helps them on the job market. You can stand out. However, there's a lot of confusion around this right now. A lot of apprentices we talked to, well, we only talked to 14 apprentices, so not a lot, but they expressed some uncertainty around if they're currently earning college credit. If their college credit they're earning applies to a credential. A lot of them shared, I have maybe some gen eds and stuff. What is that going to lead to? I don't know. And then again, it's lack of awareness. Like, is there a pathway? I could do this. I didn't know about that. Like, I can get this trade degree. Who should I talk to? So a lot of that kind of lack of awareness and clarity. And then we asked them, well, what would help you to do this? Of course, they're like, well, cost, covering the cost of it. Apprentices cannot afford all the tuition for higher education. So making there's financial support, the scheduling was a huge thing. There needs to be flexible scheduling that is accommodating to work schedules, access to clear information. So just spreading the word and awareness about it. And then that mentorship and that culture from where you're at, that if they're encouraging you, if they're saying like, this would be great, you're going to be more likely to do it. And then here's just one quote that I love from an apprentice. They said, I never thought about college. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, I need that. I was doing what I was doing. But now that I see I could actually work and go to classes, I feel like that's maybe something I want to do now. I've been looking at different options, and business administration sounds good for me, so I may pursue that after this. It's an idea that apprentices may not have seen college as like an option before, but through their apprenticeship program where they're learning and working, they're like, yeah, I can do this. I can go to college because I can do it this way. This way works for me. And so that's even just showing them more connected there to the college, the more they can kind of actually see themselves as doing it. Okay, my last but not least key finding, and each one of these should be its own webinar, but there's so many practices out there for how you can connect it. And we learned these from our case studies with different states and from literature reviews. There's kind of three main buckets of things to be thinking about. One is this clear system alignment in leadership. It's the idea of like partnership, communication, vision, data. All of that structural system alignment is a really key piece. The second piece is creating credential pathways. So this may be thinking about how do you give college credit for RSI, for on-the-job training, for prior learning? What does the credit articulation and transfer policies look like? What does it look like to recognize competencies rather than credit hours? So competency-based education. That one is so fun. We did a whole brief about that because that may be a key bridger between the systems. And then finally, the system needs supports and navigation. Navigators are a promising practice. Information, wraparound supports, which is things like childcare, transportation, financial assistance, scheduling, advising. These are all really emerging practices that there's so much more to study to see how effective these are and to see in which context are they effective. But these are just the emerging practices occurring. Okay, so that was what we found. Why should you use research? So research can help you shift the conversation from should we do this to how do we do this? And that was the big kind of missing piece in Washington that helped shift the conversation. So these are steps that you can do in your own context. This is kind of the process. It's one, build the evidence base. So go out there, look at what data you have available. If you have a longitudinal data system, we sent in a data request to the ERDC and they did the linking for us. Make a survey, do focus groups, scan the literature, talk to people in the field, the people on this call, and start documenting it. Because then you can build the evidence base and then you bring that evidence to frame your conversations with different partners. Because then is the collaboration stage. Then this evidence, it centers the learner experience. An advantage in Washington State is they had kind of a neutral facilitator. So if you can have some sort of neutral facilitation that's bringing partners together. And the goal is to really get them consensus-driven recommendations, that you're bringing everybody on board. And it's a super collaborative, based on evidence approach. Because then the systems work can happen. The systems change often can't happen without the evidence and collaboration. Then you can actually develop structured partnerships. Maybe it's some states do regular higher ed and apprenticeship meetings. Maybe it's you create different policies, legislation around this. You integrate data systems. You establish new funding mechanisms. That's a sort of systems change that is needed to connect higher education and apprenticeship, but you don't want to do that without the groundwork. That groundwork is really important. So basically research can be used as a tool to ground collaboration aimed at making systems change. And so that was mainly, that's a research perspective, how we saw how research could help frame the conversation. Now I'm really excited to open it up to our panel discussion. And we'll talk to them about how they are using research and data to help collaborate and connect their systems. So we'll spend about 15 or 20 minutes on this, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. So I'm really excited to introduce Lyle from the Washington Student Achievement Council, Rachel from Washington State Labor and Industries, and Crystal and Amanda from the Wisconsin Technical College System. So you can start adding your questions too in the chat. Harry will start monitoring that, but I will now stop sharing my screen. And there's everybody. I will first have everyone start out. Can you just briefly share your role and how your organization supports apprenticeship and or higher education? We can start with Lyle. I'll just start popcorning.
Aloha. Thanks for having me, Rachel. My name is Lyle Aramata, and I serve as an assistant director with the Washington Student Achievement Council in our Adult Pathways Division. For context, the Student Achievement Council is a state cabinet level agency. We hold our State Higher Education Executive Office, or SHIEO, position, and I primarily oversee our state's two largest state financial assistance programs for registered apprenticeships or apprentices.
Thank you, Rachel.
Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. My name is Rachel McAloon. I'm the State Director for Apprenticeship for Washington State. We are housed at the Washington State Department of Labor and Industries. I've been in this role as the Program Manager for about 9 months, and happy to be here today and see some Washingtonians in the chat. So looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Mandy?
Hi there. I am the Director of Apprenticeship and Construction for the Wisconsin Technical College System. We are the largest higher education system in the state, serving more than 300,000 students each year across our 16 technical colleges. What's unique in Wisconsin is that higher education and apprenticeship have really been connected for a very long time, going all the way back to 1911 when the state established both our apprenticeship system as well as public support for vocational and technical education. Those two systems really grew up together. Today, our technical colleges are the primary providers of apprenticeship-related instruction in Wisconsin, delivering more than 70% of that instruction statewide. In my role, I get to work closely with our 16 technical colleges to support how apprenticeship curriculum is developed and delivered, making sure it stays aligned with industry needs at both the local and state level. I also partner closely with the Department of Workforce Development to help ensure our academic policies and programs align with their regulatory requirements in apprenticeship. So my work really sits at that intersection between higher education, industry, and the apprenticeship system.
So wonderful. And Krista?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Crystal Seeley-Schreck. I'm the Associate Vice President for Instruction for the Tech College System in Wisconsin. I oversee all of the academic and occupational programs and courses for our 16 technical colleges, including applied associate's degrees, tech diplomas, and our liberal arts transfer programs. I have had the opportunity to serve on our state's Department of Workforce Development State Apprenticeship Council, Advisory Council for the past 8 years in this role. So I have a lot of great experience working directly with our apprenticeship partners and workforce partners in the state to ensure these partnerships.
Wonderful. We're already getting good questions. That's a great one, Stephen. All right, so we're going to start off. So this whole conversation is about connecting higher education and apprenticeship. What does that actually look like in your system? Can you talk a little bit about those points of collaboration between the two? Mandy, you've led on to this already a little bit, but yeah, just curious for all of you, how does your state or system help connect apprenticeship and higher ed?
I'll jump in. So Washington State, we're an SAA state. L&I, or Labor and Industries, is the administrative arm of our Washington State Apprenticeship and Training Council. We have roughly 15,500 active apprentices, which represent over 5,000 employers and 400 occupations. 80% of our system is in the building and construction trades. 80% of our system is union, though those are not the same. 80% we have union healthcare and union educator programs. We work closely with the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges in advancing our sponsors, utilizing the community and technical college system, some of the barriers that Rachel talked about in her slides, and then also work quarterly with the State Board for Community and Technical College on our RSI, which is, we call it related supplemental instruction. Most states and the feds call it related technical instruction. It's the exact same thing. But we review every new occupation, every updated standard with the State Board. And then we have 34 community and technical colleges in our state. 14 of those have a relationship with a program through the related supplemental instruction. And Rachel alluded to this. So just over 83% have that relationship. 60% of those, of that 80, the apprenticeship sponsors are utilizing the CTC for credits, but not instructors or facilities. And then 23% of that 80% actually could be housed on the community and technical college campus, and they are utilizing the instructors and facilities.
I'll jump in there and just add, as Rachel elaborately framed Washington's kind of environment for or landscape for registered apprenticeship, our agency kind of comes into this space having to navigate, these pre-existing relationships and structure relatively recently with the advent of our financial assistance programs. But traditionally, our agency has been focused on work around a 70% post-secondary credential attainment goal to meet our state's workforce skill needs. And as we look ahead, our K-12 class sizes are going to start to shrink with birth rate declines, and we have other factors that are impacting our workforce needs. And so our agency is trying to ensure that we can meet some of those objectives and demands that we're hearing from employers in the state. And I think this is really reflective of our state's investment in supporting post-secondary credential attainment through the establishment of the Washington College Grant, which we rebranded to be WAL Grant to be more inclusive of career training programs, such as state registered apprenticeships. And it is one of the most generous state financial assistance programs in the country, mirroring many aspects of the federal Pell Grant system. So we've had to really take what works in the college and try to fit it for registered apprenticeships, which Rachel pointed out again, doesn't flow smoothly across all apprenticeship programs. We have a lot of different setups and connection points, and trying to make it equitable across all programs has been the work we've been investing in over the last few years. Last year, we've been able to get out nearly nine or more than $9 million actually in grant aid through our WILD Grant for Apprenticeship program to more than 20, just under 2,600 apprentices in the state of Washington. And then we've also been able to give out just under $1 million through our Native American Apprentice Assistance Program. So it's been a work in progress. We're not there yet, but we continue to do the work to create more access here in this space.
I can jump in for Wisconsin. So as Mandy said earlier, in Wisconsin, our technical college system is named as the first provider of choice for paid related instruction for apprenticeship. We have 115 years of experience collaborating and integrating with our workforce development partners. And in our system, we really view apprenticeship as an important modality of instruction. It's an option for many of our credentials. So we continuously collaborate with our Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards on policies, fundings, and initiatives. We sit on many of their committees and vice versa. So we've had the opportunity to collaborate on federal Department of Labor grants in the past decade, especially on emerging fields where we've been able to expand apprenticeships in fields such as nursing, surgical technology, and teaching, which Mandy will go into a little bit more. But those are areas where there's required credential connection that the apprentices have to have the actual degree attainment in order to function in the field. So we've had great success in those areas. And what's really important is that in our system, a student, when they're an apprentice, they are a student. They are a college student, just like any other college student enrolled in a traditional program. They receive college credits for any courses that they're taking at our colleges. And importantly, they receive the same student services that other students. They have access to intercollegiate sports. They have access to tutoring. They have access to basic needs support, which really helps support apprentices as people and helps them towards their career journey wherever they're intending to go past their career outcomes as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in our state. We see apprenticeship. We're committed to apprenticeship as a modality. In our system as a whole, every year we provide at least $500,000 to our colleges to support direct instruction support for apprenticeships that may need some additional support getting off the ground, and just that's integrated in our systems and our annual grants that we provide. I'll turn it over to Mandy to dig in some more.
Yeah, all of what Crystal said, absolutely. So in Wisconsin, connecting apprenticeship and higher education is really central to how our systems operate day to day. Our partnership is really closely interwoven. For example, when DWD identifies a new occupation that's a good fit for apprenticeship, they work directly with us. As Crystal mentioned, they work with us first to identify if there is a good college that could be a partner for related instruction. We look at things like existing academic programs at the colleges, relationships with business partners throughout the state, and then just geography to make sure the model will actually work on the ground. One trend we're seeing more and more is the use of existing technical college coursework and credentials as part of building that apprenticeship training. That means apprentices are often sitting in the same classrooms and labs as students who are working toward more traditional academic programs like technical diplomas or associate degrees. In many cases, as Crystal mentioned, apprenticeship curricula now intentionally includes courses from those diploma and degree programs, and sometimes completing that full college credential is actually a condition and a part of the apprenticeship itself. So for apprentices, higher education isn't something separate or extra. It's actually integrated into their training from the start in many cases.
Really great, fascinating example. So even here you see how different states have very different histories and relationships between the two systems. So there's not going to be one model that works for everybody. It's so context dependent. So thinking about the research and evidence that we just shared, what research and evidence has helped you or do you all use in your work to help advance connections? What data and research are you interested in or that you use?
I'll start. So, our agency has a strategic action plan, and I've already mentioned our 70% post-secondary credential attainment goal. We kind of focus that around a framework with 4 strategic cluster areas: affordability, enrollment, basic needs, and completion, all centering on equity. And this pulls in a lot of data needs, right? And insights. And as our agencies work to kind of expand access to our grant programs, it's been crucial to recognize, I think, as Crystal said, that our registered apprentices, especially those that are starting their program in their first year, are not unlike many of our college students who are enrolled in college degree pathways. Just as we have unhoused college students, we have unhoused apprentices, right? And so that basic need component is something that we are very much focused on and trying to meet because it impacts who can access a registered apprenticeship program. And, we have such differing, I think, diversity within our apprenticeship system that, not all apprentices are going to have tuition factors that a college student would have, but that doesn't mean that even if we provided funding for all the tuition that we could, that they're able to get to on-the-job training program. If they can't afford the $250 work boots in the building trades, or we're in a kind of wetter climate here in Washington, so if they can't afford the high visibility rain gear, these costs can easily exceed $1,000 per year for an apprentice. And one of the things that we've done as an agency was look at research that one of our institutions of higher education did during the pandemic, and found that if a student had a $500 unexpected need during the pandemic emergency, they were more likely to be trying to borrow that money or forego meals or other basic needs to pay for that $500, as opposed to our students who were less in financial need and could take that money out of bank account or ask a family member for that. So as a result, we created a temporary Washington Bridge grant, which gave our students and our apprentices an extra $500 to help them support those emergency needs for those in our lowest median family income bracket. So that was, some of the ways that I see how we're looking at this holistically, not just the college system and not just the apprenticeship system, but together.
Thank you. Well, I'll jump in too. So we're also fortunate in Washington State that we have a legislature that understands the need for this data, which goes to 5764, which you were talking about, Rachel. And in addition to retention studies we've done for apprentices and the apprentice survey that you highlighted, for me, the biggest insight and takeaway, is the lack of apprentices that are receiving the degree or actually completing the degree, right? And I think that speaks to this general dynamic of, if you can't get into college, you go to apprenticeship, right? And apprenticeship is different than college. Instead of really teaching students and parents and counselors and workers that they're both post-secondary education, there's value in both. Apprenticeship does include college credit. It does include higher education. And so there's just a gap in understanding there. And the biggest insight, right, that's driving my work from that data is really getting out there and teaching the apprentices and the program sponsors and the training agents and the employers, right, that there's value in that degree. There's value in getting those general education credits. a degree is never going to hurt you in your career, just like an apprenticeship completion is never going to hurt you. And particularly in a system that's so heavy in the building and construction trades, aging out and on-the-job injuries are very real. And so you don't know what's going to happen. The average age of apprentices in our state is like 28, 29, and you just don't know what 50 is going to look like, right? And so really teaching the apprentices there's value in going and getting those general education degrees. And we're working very closely with the State Board and Community and Technical Colleges on how we can do outreach around that, not just to the apprentices, but also to the colleges. I think apprenticeship in general can kind of be this like very confusing and mythical thing, right? And so it's also even having the colleges understand what is apprenticeship and what it's not.
So great. Crystal, Mandy?
I have a similar perspective to Rachel here. I agree that a really useful piece of data that you shared was related to the apprentice interest in earning post-secondary credit and credentials. We seek to get that feedback as well. Annually, we survey apprenticeship completers in Wisconsin, and we ask them about that. We ask them about their interest in advancing their education. We've seen that interest decline a little bit in recent years. I think that could be due to the fact that we are creating more degree apprenticeships and they aren't necessarily thinking about having to add something extra because they've already done that or they're already doing that. But I think that evidence was both affirming and motivating. On one hand, it confirms that the way we've been designing apprenticeship programs lately by intentionally looking at those existing diploma and degree that existing coursework for related instruction really is the right approach. It also reinforced a recent decision that we made to expand eligibility for a program that grants up to 39 associate degree credits to many apprenticeship completers. I think it's probably just repackaged. It's very similar to what was described in Washington. It's through the Registered Apprenticeship College Consortium. In Wisconsin, we call it the Technical Studies Journey Worker Associate Degree. So that data tells us we're heading in a direction that aligns with those apprentices' goals. But I think what's more important even is how we use that data as a starting point rather than an end point. It pushes us to ask, what more can we do? Could we expand credit for prior learning opportunities that recognize those skills gained through apprenticeship? Could we do a better job communicating or marketing those pathways and those opportunities that already exist? So I think the value of the data is validation, but it's also helping spark the next set of questions and improvements we could make.
And as Mandy mentioned, I did put a link to our apprenticeship completer report, our most recent one, in the chat. So folks are welcome to look at that and happy to field questions offline about our completer report. But as a system, we rely heavily on labor market information and institutional data tracking to make data-informed decisions with all of our programs, and apprenticeship is included in that. So I think it's critical. This report, I don't know how long we've done it, but we've done it for at least the past decade, has been a critical tool for tracking our data across time and for telling the story of apprenticeship in our state, being able to elevate the median salary in this year's report, the median salary for all apprentices being $90,000, that being the tagline for why apprenticeship really is a valuable pathway for students, has been tremendously helpful. So I can't stress enough the importance of having the institutional data tracking, and then having this survey that we do annually to apprenticeship completers has been incredibly helpful to tell the story for raising awareness.
Thank you. And like you said, Mandy, it feels like there's now more. Once you start answering something, more questions just keep coming from it. I feel like this is just a start in how learning is recognized across systems and how we build more navigable pathways. So that was really exciting. So for the purposes of time, we're going to jump into the Q&A because you guys have really great questions. So I'm going to pass it. Thank you, panelists. We're going to keep hearing from everybody. Harry will field us some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. That was a great discussion. We've got quite a few questions people have been putting through the chat, so I'm going to try and work through those. Before we do, I just want to second the point that Rachel said about, there's a perception sometimes if you can't go to college, choose apprenticeship, it's secondary. This is not true at all. It's a different delivery model, right? You can get to the same outcome. I think that's such an important point, worth repeating. Cool. We're going to start with a question from Stephen, which is about higher education is not known for being nimble. The pace of change can be kind of slow. These are large, complicated institutions. How do you bring academic faculty along? Would anyone like to jump in and talk about that? How have you kind of told the story of apprenticeship to an audience that's not used to it?
I'll jump in really quickly. The concept of academia not being very nimble is well understood, and I love the fact that the tech colleges in Wisconsin counter that. So we actually thrive on being way more nimble than a lot of institutions. We have a very streamlined program review process and opportunities for new apprenticeships to get online and started in the colleges. So we really try to keep ourselves at pace with industry as much as possible. We can't always turn on a dime, but we do try to do things as quickly as possible and have just a several month process that it takes to get a new program online, which is much quicker than a lot of traditional programs. I think the key is to engage faculty from the beginning with the development. So whenever we are starting new program development, including those faculty for the beginning and the program design with the industry partners has been really critical.
And I'll also add, I think connecting with the right person at the college. So I've had a lot of success in connecting with the workforce deans at the college who handle more of the workforce programs, right, which really align with apprenticeship. And I do want to just really quickly, I put in the chat, so the State Board for Community and Technical College created a website just for apprenticeships and the college system, right? So it's the Apprenticeship Associate of Applied Science degree. This is the same degree rebranded that Rachel mentioned. It used to be previously called the Multi-Occupational Trades degree. And so it really just comes down to that outreach, just like you would do outreach and education to employers. You have to continually do outreach and education to your community and technical colleges and get your staff out to meet them, do tours of their programs, find out where you align, right? And then maybe if you have, if they have a great welding program and you have a new sponsor come forward, right, you're going to think of that college for the RSI. So it's really just continual education and outreach.
Thanks very much, both. Rachel, on that point, can I ask, this is related to Cameron's question about how you actually award apprenticeship degrees, whether 2-year or 4-year. Do you mind just explaining a little bit how just the practicality and mechanics of how the degree gets awarded?
Yeah, so I'd encourage you all to explore that website I put in the chat. So basically what it comes down to is there's three requirements. You have to complete a registered apprenticeship program that was over 6,000 hours, so a 3-year program. You have to have also completed 432 hours of the related supplemental or technical instruction. And then you also have to go back and get those general education coursework or requirements, which do vary by the college. But those are the 3 main requirements of that AAS degree or the apprenticeship degree. And then we also have transfer options for that degree too, where you can take the apprenticeship AAS and transfer it for a Bachelor of Applied Science.
Thanks, Rachel. How about in Wisconsin? How does the actual what are the requirements to get the degree? What is the practical process like?
You want to take that, Mandy?
Sure. Are the requirements for our associate degree?
The journey worker.
Yeah. So in Wisconsin, very similar to what Rachel described. So in Wisconsin, they have to have related instruction that's at least 400 hours in order for it to be an eligible apprenticeship program. Previously, that had to be completed at a Wisconsin technical college. We've recently expanded that such that any DWD BAS approved provider of related instruction, we can, through credit for prior learning, we can recognize that experience and grant those 39 associate degree credits. They then have 21 gen ed credits that they have to take in conjunction with that to achieve their associate degree. So very similar to what Rachel described. They can receive federal financial aid for participating in those gen ed courses. And if their related instruction was part of a degree that was otherwise financial aid eligible, they could actually receive federal financial aid throughout their whole program.
Brilliant. Thank you. And on the subject of finances, we've got a question for Washington, but I think it can apply to both of you, which is about do you tend to co-enroll your apprentices in WIOA?
This is a huge opportunity for us in our state. So we have very, very low enrollment into WIOA, and it's something I'm working with our Washington Workforce Association and educating our program sponsors on. We're also a little unique in that WIOA doesn't fund any of our apprenticeship systems, so our state agency funds our staff. And so definitely increased WIOA collaboration is something we're working on and looking at.
Thanks, Rachel. I think that's a really similar story across the country, definitely from the last data we saw about 2023. The level of participation of WIOA funded people in apprenticeship was about 0.3% or so. It's really, really low.
I would just add on to that too, that I've seen when I've kind of dug into this, that the programs that are in that 23% where they actually are on the college campus or utilize the college for instructors and facilities, that those tend to be the programs that are co-enrolled in WIOA. And I really credit that to the Community and Technical College for lifting that up to and teaching the programs about that.
That's a good point. Crystal, Mandy, how about in Wisconsin? Do you have any interaction with WIOA?
I'm so sorry, Harry. I'm having troubles with my speakers or with my sound. Can you repeat that? I'm so sorry.
Do you have any interaction with WIOA programs with your apprenticeship? So are your apprentices co-enrolled WIOA programs?
Mandy, I can take that. I just reached out to our WIOA. Mandy and I don't handle WIOA for Wisconsin, but I reached out to my colleague who does, and she's digging into it. So I can't say to that for sure, but I imagine it's probably very similar to what Rachel mentioned. But I can get an answer back to you guys later.
Brilliant. And final question. Sorry, we haven't been able to get through all the questions in the chat, but it's great to see the level of interest. Final question on the same topic of funding from James, which is what are the opportunities to create more affordable apprenticeship degree pathways, given that traditional higher education cost structures will be a barrier for many of our apprentices?
Harry,
How do you keep this as an apprenticeship that is free to the learner, but with a degree model?
Yeah, I think that's the toughest question I saw in the chat.
I kept it for the end.
Yeah, that's something we're continually looking at. It also, unfortunately, I think with a lot of states in a deficit, Washington State certainly is, right? It's a challenge. But through part of that legislation, the 5764, Labor and Industries, WASAC, the State Board for Community and Technical College, other state agencies and program sponsors and stakeholders in apprenticeship are really looking at how we can improve that system, improve the collaboration and the funding for the colleges also, and the programs. It really is a challenge and a barrier on both sides, right? Particularly in Washington State, where we're looking to expand into healthcare and education. So I wish I had a great answer for you, but that's a magic wand question for right now.
It is. That makes a lot of sense. Hopefully one opportunity that we'll start to grapple with in the next few months is Workforce Pell coming online, but that will come with all the challenges we've been grappling today about translating apprenticeship into higher education structures. We'll have to figure that out to access that funding. Brilliant. We are out of time, so I'm gonna wrap us up. Last thing to do is to say a massive thank you to our brilliant panel and to Rachel and the Education Northwest team for sharing this work. It's a really important issue. You've shared some fascinating data today. As far as I'm aware, this is the first time we've really seen data like this out in the open. So yeah, we're really pleased to share a light on it. Next week, we've got a webinar looking at rural apprenticeships and funding opportunities to support those programs. We're then going to take a break for a little bit until after our summit, but you can follow all our webinars on the events page on our website. That is it. I'm going to wrap us up there. So thank you everyone for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.